Sorry about that. 100% not my fault. Yeah, I'm recording now. We lost the last video, but oh well. Okay, so we've got our fetch data here. We've got our use effect. Let's go ahead and let's just go ahead and call that inside of here. So we'll say fetch data, and now the URL I'll pass is Rafid.
The URL?
Which one? Now that we're time to call it.
Now it's slash cars.
Boom. Thank you. Right now it's slash cars. And this should only run the one time.
Isn't it like the full localhost 3000 slash cars or something like that?
Well, we don't need to do that because now our front end package JSON says in that proxy tag to go look at localhost 3001. So now we don't have to write that full path. Eventually this will all change over too when we actually go to like push these to production and host them because there won't be that local host there. So it will be all about like environment, path, and whatnot. But for now, this is how we will be doing it. Okay, so instead of div here, I'm just going to return a UL. And then let's go ahead and map through our cars. So I'm going to just say let show cars. Oh, sorry, that should be const. I'm still in that habit. Const, and I'll say cars.map for every car. I forget a lot of the data that is coming out. I think we had brand, model, and year though. So I'm just going to return. Okay, so best practice right now, just for the record, would be to now make a car display. And I would pass my car information via props. Okay, let's do that instead. It won't take very long. So we'll just go ahead and say car, because that's what I'm going to want to pass. And from my car, I will pass brand, which would be car.brand. We'll pass model, which will be car.model. And we'll have year, which will be car.year. Okay? Oh, an extra angle bracket there, closing bracket. Okay, so that's our car. Car doesn't exist anywhere yet, so let's go ahead and make it. I guess I'll make a components folder. Just do the whole thing. It doesn't take too long. Components. And inside of my components folder, we'll make our file called car.js. And inside of there, we will import React from React. Const car. Does car need to, what things are we expecting to take in from car? Brand, yeah. So I'm going to just destructure these out. Model and year. Great. So that way I'll have access to them. And then we can go ahead and return. I'll put everything in an li because these are going inside of a ul. And we can go ahead and just say brand points to brand. And we'll do the same thing with the rest. Model, year. I'm not particularly concerned about how nice this looks. And then let's just go ahead and export it. Okay. And so inside of our app.js, we can actually import it. We wrote the code we wish we had, and then we went ahead and updated our code so that we had the code that we wished. Right? Yeah. I think that's how that would go. So we'll say import car from /component/car. Great. Okay, so now we've actually got our car. Remember, this is how we pass props. I still hear some people being confused about how we're passing props. We just pass them as if we're adding attributes into the way we've been doing attributes with like HTML tags and stuff. These will become the keys in the props object. These will become the value that the keys point to in the props object. The component, this function, will receive that props object as its argument. So we can destructure it, or we can call props dot whatever key in that component. Okay, so then let's go ahead and instead show our cars. We'll say show cars, and I am missing a key here as well. This is for React to keep track of things. We need this whenever we're doing iteration, like a map. And this should just be a unique identifier. So for this one, I'll just say car.id because I'm pretty sure we have an ID. Okay, so let's take a look, check our work. It all works. So that's kind of exciting because now we're getting information from our backend to our front end. So the real thing to realize from that is in our front end package JSON, we added this proxy line that said where we want to look. Okay, that was the only change, and we changed our backend to be port 3001 to match up to this proxy. So that way we can just say /cars. I can still say like HTTPS, whatever, Ghibli API. I can still do all that if I need. But if I just want to get stuff from my database, I can go ahead and just do /cars. I can do the route. Or what you might want to start working on writing and remembering is like API/API/cars. Start everything with API. Any questions on that? Yes. So something that's kind of exciting is that you guys already have hooks. I don't know if you remember, but when we looked at 6.2's social media apps, none of them had hooks yet. They didn't know them yet. What? They didn't know hooks at all yet. So we do. So our apps are already technically going to be more advanced. So I know we said that when we got to this point, we were going to kick their butts. Make sure you mention that you're writing your app in hooks. Okay. Also, I know they continue to say Pursuit's not a boot camp, but all the other boot camps don't seem to teach hooks yet. So because they're kind of new and they haven't updated the curriculum yet. So we have a bit of a competitive advantage on that.
It's
Not just me. Thanks. But you have to learn them. Okay. That's on you. Yeah.
So if instead of doing /cars, if we just put like a regular,
Yeah, that will still work.
So it doesn't care about localhost 2000 unless it's like kind of like that.
Yeah, it will care only if it's kind of like that.
If I put it full.
No problem. It will take that instead. It won't add that to your proxy.
Okay.
Yeah, Sin.
Can you go back to the cars.js component?
Sure. That's just one of our presentational components, right? Doing not much, just taking in that brand, model, and year. I'm destructuring it, right? It is inside of an object. That object is called props. So we're taking that out, taking those arguments out. This way it's written a little bit cleaner.
And is there anything in that other cars.js file?
Oh, this was just so we could see what data we were getting back from our backend.
Okay.
So that was our backend card, yes. Okay, not too bad. So for Doug's request, let's go ahead and make a custom hook. Let's go see what that might look like. Okay, let's make another custom hook. Wow, I've got you and the computer's working pretty decent. So inside of my source, I'm going to make a utilities folder, util, and let's go ahead and make a file, and I'm going to call this custom hooks.js. Okay, so the hook that Doug really wants to make is like, well, every time we fetch data, and that as if it was just a fetch data and component of not. So we're only fetching it the one time and having that data. Okay. So let's go see kind of what that might look like. So if I'm gonna, what do we think? What hooks am I gonna need to help me write my custom hook? Use effect and use state. Okay, I agree, right? Because use effect we're gonna use to have that component did not kind of behavior. Use state so that we can keep track of what's coming in. So let's go ahead and import those. So I'll say use effect and use state. The order of these don't matter, right? Just to be clear. From React, let's go ahead and call this, what would be a good name for this? Maybe use HTTP or use fetch. Could be anything, right? As long as it starts with use. Yeah, call it use and abuse. That's the joke for the kids that are watching this YouTube channel. This is, no, I specifically say each one that's not for kids. Although there is a kid in here. Okay. Cannot stop saying things I shouldn't. Let's say. Oh my goodness. We will call this use HTTP. Okay. So what do we think we need to pass in? What are some of the things we might need to pass in? A URL, sure. Let's pass in a URL. Anything else we might want to pass in? The route. Yeah, that's the URL. Doug?
Where are you going to save that, that data that you're doing access for?
Where am I going to save the data?
Yeah.
Doesn't it return your data?
It's going to return the data.
Okay. Can we have it set up where you can automatically save it?
Save it. Like in a
Yeah,
post?
save the state.
Oh yeah, we're going to do all that. Don't worry.
Since we're dealing with use state, we need to keep track of that.
Of a what?
Like an initial value.
Yeah, I think an initial value would be a good, helpful thing. That sounds good because we are dealing with use state. Initial value. Okay, and any other arguments that you guys can think of? If not, it's fine. I'm also going to throw export in front of this just so I can not forget. Right, that's one way of exporting. If you export like that, you just have to destructure it to come in. You can even export your components that way. I used to, but I don't anymore, and I do it with the default. That way it's a little more clear that it's a component if you do it with the default, while if you do it with the destructure, it's more clear that this is like a function of some help. That's how I think of it. All right, so let's go ahead and keep track. So we're going to have some sort of data, right? And we should have a way to set the data. Definitely not that. Set the data. That's going to be what? Use state. And we will pass in our initial value. All right, that looks pretty good. What else might we care about to know, which we haven't been using, but what might be something nice to know while we're getting information? What's something we see in a lot of websites that we haven't really been implementing? Loading, right? We don't know if the page is still loading. Like, there's so many spinners that you see in websites, or in ours maybe we'll just have the word loading or something. But actually, I encourage you to try to make spinners and stuff like social media. Adding a spinner to your project is not as daunting as it might seem like it might be. Have that confidence. So we will call this loading, or is loading. How about? Set loading. Set is loading. We'll make that a use state. And this should initialize as what? I think I'm going to go with false because it hasn't started loading quite yet. We'll set it to true pretty much immediately. Okay. Okay, so let's also now do our use effect. Or, well, we can just take a lot of this from our app.js, right? Let's go ahead and steal some information. We'll go to custom hook. We call this fetch data. Async await. We will have to do, we'll just send back res.data. We'll take in a URL, catch error. This won't be set cars, it would be what? Set data. This will be set data. We shouldn't automatically send back an empty array. I'm just going to set that to like an initial value. As soon as we call fetch data, I am going to set is loading to true. What? It didn't take over all the tabbing, eh? The way I would want that to be. All right, and then once we get our information back, let's set our is loading to false. And I should do that down here as well. Okay, so now we have to call this. Right? We still on the same page. This is essentially the same thing we were doing in the other one. We just added a little bit of a is loading state to keep track whether or not we're still waiting for that request and response to come back. So just like the other one, we'll do our use effect. We only want this to run one time. We decided that if you need it to run more than one time, you'll have to write a different hook or update this hook to handle that. Well, the Apple TV's still working, so they must have Sprint. What do you have, Daniel? Oh, that's it. That's it. Okay, let's go ahead and call fetch data, and we will pass in our URL. And then, so what should we return from here? What do we care to return? So we got to return the data. I agree. Okay, so we'll return data. Anything else we should return? What might be helpful? The loading, right? So we'll return data and is loading. I got to remember that word. Data is loading. Okay. So now we've got this use HTTP hook that's going to only run one time to go fetch data. So let's try it out and see how it might help us. So we'll go in here. Let's go ahead and import use HTTP from /util/custom hooks. Okay, so I no longer need, let's see, let's go ahead and say we're not going to be using this anymore. That's essentially what our app is doing, our hook is doing, and our hook does this for us as well, right? So let's think about this. So we will say const. We have our data first, so I'm going to call this cars. Well, I'm going to call this cars object, essentially, because we know that we wrote this hook not specifically for this one, right? So we couldn't say res.data.cars. We just sent back res.data. Res.data looks like an object with message, success, and cars. So I'll say, okay, so it's this cars object. We have our is loading. I think I actually have to call this data if I want to destructure this correctly. So I think I have to call it the same thing. And then we will say use HTTP, our custom hook. We'll give it an initial. Yeah, we could give it an empty array or an empty object. We kind of have to decide because we're going to have to account for whether or not we've gotten it back. Let's see. Okay, let's say it's an empty array. Sure. That seems like that's fine. And so then let's go ahead and throw an if statement in here. So we say like, hey, if is loading. So if we're loading, let's just go ahead and return a div that says loading for now. Okay. Otherwise, we'll say cars. I'm going to call that cars is equal to data.cars, and this will be cars. So not a lot of change, right? Let's see if this works.
Cars.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, so now we have this data is loading. If it's loading, let's go ahead and just return this that says loading. Otherwise, let's map through these cars and print them.
You gotta put Axios.
Axios is not defined in our custom hook. Great. So let's go ahead and import that as well. Okay, great. Let's try it out. What breaks? Cannot read property cars of undefined. So that means, oh yeah, okay. So that's because we have to do, we're getting something back here. Data is undefined at first. Hang on, let's go see. Let's see what happens. Yeah, Deb?
Doesn't that give you an object when you're already feeding into res.data? So
Res.data.
You want to feed into the message.
The message, let's go see. I forget what the API looked like. So we've hit it right away, and we can look at what is data. Data is currently undefined. Why is data undefined? What do we do in our custom hook? Data. Any ideas?
Did you pass the URL?
Did I pass the URL?
Data's
I did not pass the URL. So our custom hook
takes in a URL.
takes in a URL and then the initial value. Great. Let's hope that's it. That would be nice. So our URL is /cars. Just gonna remove the debugger for now, see if it works. This is still the old debugger. Okay, so we're still getting an error. Cannot read property map of undefined. So that means we haven't gotten our cars yet. So this is probably happening. Okay, I wonder what does happen if we set this to true first. Maybe you're right. Maybe that would be a better choice. Let's try it. Because I think we're not hitting that on the first render, and it's complaining because of that. Okay, yeah, that was it. So, great, nice call, Isaiah. Right, so we can set the initial state to just is loading as true. And that way, the very first time we do hit this cars got data, we hit our is loading. Otherwise, it tries to do one iteration first. So now we've taken this whole component that we've written. Right? I'll just move this down so that you can see it without that. Right? So now this is our component using our custom hook. That is definitely 90% cleaner. Yeah, Will.
False didn't work.
Sure. So false didn't work because when the first thing happened, is loading comes back as false. So on the next line here, it's still false. So then it's saying data.cars, and our data is undefined at that moment. Or, well, actually, our data is not undefined at the moment, but our data was an empty array. And so array.cars gives back undefined. And then you can't call map on undefined. So if we start with is loading as true, then we immediately will return our is loading. And we can see that hopefully we'll see it here. If I can refresh, we'll see a quick sign of loading. Maybe not, it might be too fast. Well, yeah, so it's very fast. Sometimes you can see it flash. This data's not too big. It's like our database is pretty small. There's an interesting idea about user interface and user experience where sometimes some people have the belief that things should take longer to load, like in this sense, like because this is so fast, but it's not perfect. Like there's still like that flash, so they think the user shouldn't experience the flash, but would rather see a spinner go all the way through before seeing the information. So that's just something interesting to think about. I'm not encouraging you to do that, but you see that quick loading would be probably a nicer experience to see it. Have it not get your information as quick.
So what would you do?
You'd have to control the time. I haven't dived into it too much to be totally transparent. Slick, icky ear. Is loading? We just wrote it as part of our custom hook. We made this up. Doug?
Can you add a set timer before you do the fetch data so you can see that it's loading?
Sure, we can try it. Let's go ahead and try it. So we'll say set timeout. We'll say 3 seconds. See, there we go. That's really long. That's way too long. It should probably only be like a second or two. But that could improve the user experience, especially if you have a spinner, something for the user to track with their eyes. If it just says loading, it's kind of boring. But I'm going to comment that out because it's not crucial to the code. Okay? Yeah, Isaiah. The set timeout is just making it so the data's not loading as fast so that we can see that it says loading. Because otherwise it just flashes. Like that. So it's just this idea that if you had a spinner, if the data is too fast, it could be a little uncomfortable for the user to have this flash and then go. They'd rather have the spinner do one rotation and then see. It's an interesting UI. You don't have to really worry about that at this point. It's just something to be aware of. Any other questions on custom hook, hooks in general, front-end, back-end connection? No? Okay. So the rest of this time until lunch is your time. Oh man, is it going to let me stop? Oh yeah.